whatever the targets, height that here will be blessed from the Sri Lankans to reach. And wish you all the very best. Anything, Sujit, you need, just let my ADC know. Just 2 days, we will arrange, and whatever assistance you need, definitely make it. I may not be available on the phone, but my staff will definitely work for me. I have 200,000 large army. So one SMS and one call, they will start working in this country. Thank you very much. Thank you. Shall we start at 9? I saw the I downloaded it. Once somebody wanted to go to Mena, back. Oh, okay. They have got peace. I have been very straight in my statements last few months. It's a political situation, which we believe they have to resolve constitutionally and legally. Not the armed forces to get involved. That is my stand. So everybody has praised the army for that. We are quite disciplined army. Not like our neighbors around. We don't get involved in that. We want to keep quiet. So wish that this month they will be able to finish all the problems. Solve it politically. Yeah. It's totally the political situation. As long as there is no violence in the country, I'll be the happiest. Otherwise, I don't want to lead the army. Like many parts, country has suffered enough. The extreme war. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Most Reverend Fathers, dear professors, colleagues, friends, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to Caritas SEDEC. Today, we inaugurate the international workshop, A Global and Local History of the Bodamorde Church. This is an academic event organized jointly by 3 parties. The first, the parish of San Sebastian, Archdiocese of Colombo, and Malankara Church, also Malankara Orthodox Syrian Church, Diocese of Madras, and Forum Internationale Wissenschaft, Universität Bonn. My name is Wei Zhang. I work for the Department of Religion Studies in Forum Internationale Wissenschaft in University of Bonn. First, let us welcome His Highness Dr. Iohannou Mar Dioscorous from the Diocese of Chennai to give us an introductory speech.
First of all, let us all stand up and bow our heads before our Almighty to thank Him and to pray for the success of this program. Let's thank God for making us to gather here in this wonderful place in order to glorify Him through the grace given to us by Him. We submit all those who come over here to present the purpose and the people who are going to actively participate in this conference. We submit the organizers of this conference, and let us request God to make a good result for their hard work and enthusiasm. So all together say recite the Lord's Prayer in our way. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Be seated, please. Good morning, and all. Very reverend Archiepiscopi, our fathers, reverend sisters, and beloved brethren, greet you all in the holy name of Triune God, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Personally speaking, I'm standing here with this curiosity, because conference organized is to know the history of the church in Sri Lanka, and especially the specific title is the local and the global history of honor of the church. The paradox is that I am not a historian to stand here in order to say few words about this thing. Historians are here, and I believe they all come after me one by one. So we'll wait for their presentation in order to know the history of the church in Sri Lanka, the connection between the church in Sri Lanka and the other churches of the world, especially the Indian Orthodox Church, in an ecumenical way and at the same time in an academic way. You know, as I said, I am a bit curious about it, because there is an unofficial, perhaps, organization called OCP. They were giving us some hints that there were some connections between the Indian Orthodox Church and the church in Sri Lanka. And we need to just excavate part of this connection. So, out of this curiosity, I sent two of my beloved children to Sri Lanka. One is Mr. Sujit Varghese George and the other one is Mr. Thomas Simon. Both are here. They came here in Sri Lanka and they tried to find out any hints of the Orthodox Church here, and they couldn't find anything. Finally, they started trying to search in the Google. Now these days, we know everything is searched through Google. And the Google guided them. Just they typed Orthodox Church in Sri Lanka. And the Google guided them to a clock shop, watch shop. Watch that, wristwatch shop, I think. And they were wondering. And anyhow, they entered the shop and asked the people in the shop. When we search for the Orthodox Church in Sri Lanka, the Google led us here. So, do you know anything about the Orthodox Church? Immediately, the people in the shop, they told them, yes, we are the descendants of the Orthodox Church in Sri Lanka. And they showed them some documents. The old registers of the Orthodox Church in Sri Lanka. List of some parishes, the office bearers of the church, the bishops who have come over here, the one who established the Indian Orthodox Church here, Alvaris Mar Julius of blessed memory, and some ordination happened here by, administered by Alvaris Mar Julius of blessed memory and the saintly person, Parimala Mar Gregorios. Baptism administered here, marriage administered here, Holy Kurbana conducted here. All those things are seen through some documents found in the watch shop. So this is the beginning of our curiosity and starting point of our modern inquiry and connection with the church in Sri Lanka. So let me first of all, as a bishop of the Indian Orthodox Church, let me first of all thank the OCP, because they were the people who were making this curiosity in us, and the two of our beloved children, Thomas Simon and Sujit Varghese George. The starting point is there. That is what I am just telling about them. After their arrival back in Chennai, I formed a small committee unofficially in order to connect with the church in Sri Lanka. Father Linu Lucas, and that committee consisted of Father Linu Lucas, Sujit George, Thomas Simon, Mr. K. Matthew Engel, and some others. And this seminar is a result of course, not only it is a joint venture, but from our part, this seminar is a result of their hard work and enthusiasm. So let me thank them also for their work. As we know very well, this is a joint venture of the Madras Diocese of the Malankara Orthodox Syrian Church, St. Sebastian Parish of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Sri Lanka, and the Forum International Wissenschaft of the University of Bonn at Caritas, Colombo, these three organizations or communities, they come together and realize this wonderful program. So here, let me give our thanks and gratitude to His Eminence Cardinal Malcolm Regit of Colombo and his priest, especially to Father Joey and Sister, I forgot her name. They are doing hard work for for the realization program. The administrators of the University of Modern Caritas and the Orthodox Church in India, in which I am a bishop. These three groups, they came together and they are the group that make this the realization of this conference. I think this conference is important for three main reasons. First one, this is first of its kind because we have not had the opportunity or openness or collaboration in the past to come together and to create a common platform. It seems it is the first time a renounced university like the University of Bonn is collaborating with the churches in Sri Lanka and India together, especially with the Malankara Orthodox Church of India to do a postgraduate research. I thank Dr. Vail for making this realized. Hope this effort will help us to convert our gained knowledge into some practical implementation of common Christian witness. The second importance is that this conference is unique because it gives us a wonderful opportunity to interact and work together as brothers in Christ. This is both ecumenical and academically intensive in nature. And the third importance is that it is truly a historical one because church history so far has been written and studied from a particular community's point of view and often does not give a full picture of the actual truth. When we have a platform like this to bring together different dimensions of the same event, the truth begins to take shape. And thus it becomes a joint effort of Christian brotherhood to seek and search the real truth, which is Christ our Lord Himself. History of Bona Morte Church, local and global. The title itself says something. It has got some connection with the local community here, and at the same time it has got a wider connection with the global Christian community, and especially the Christian community, and again specifically our church in India. I bow my head to all our predecessors, especially the blessed memories of Alvaris Mariulios, Parimela Georgis Gregorios, and all the other saintly fathers who have come over here to make this connection proper. May God bless us all. And it seems that the historians who are going to present And the observers who are going to participate are from different regions of the world, from within India and from outside India, from Sri Lanka. All are welcome. And I wish you all the best to enjoy this seminar. God bless you all, and thank you.
Thank you very much for your welcome speech, Your Highness. Let's now welcome our co-convener of this workshop, Father Joy Mariaratnam, to give us a welcome speech. Father Mariaratnam is a Claretian missionary working as the parish priest of St. Sebastian Church.
Your Grace, Bishop of Chennai of the Malankara Orthodox Syrian Church, dear Reverend Fathers, Sisters, Professors, my ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. This is truly a very great opportunity that I have received. While I serve as the parish priest of Bonamorte, such an event taking place, I always believe discovery of the history will help us to find out the truth. Once we find the truth will set us free somewhere. And I always believe when we discover something, we will not only remain awestruck, but we also grow in reverence towards the thing that is discovered. When I came to Bonamorte Church as the parish priest, I came with childish memories because I am from that area. I knew that church was somewhat unique because of its religious importance. Because we thought that is the only church dedicated to Our Lady of Good Death in Sri Lanka, and some even claim one of the unique churches of South Asia. Probably the devotion might have come through the Portuguese from Brazil and those parts of the world. Fathers will be clarifying them. Later, I began to ask two of my famous historians in Sri Lanka something about this Bonamorte Church. One is already here, Father Sextus. One of the priests whom I respect so much for his knowledge and simplicity. He explained to me so many historical importance about that church. He was able to tell me in very brief the history of the church, the changes that it has undergone, the impact it has made in the lives of the people, and how it has become today a church administered by the Archdiocese of Colombo, Roman Catholic Church. And then the second person is Mr. Devota. I think he is expected at any moment here. He will be with us whole day tomorrow. He also made me to understand the real history. From the childhood I have heard a religious history. But these two people helped me to know the real history of the church. It was a challenge for me to accept. But that is the truth. When I came to know the truth, the real history of the church, I was really happy and felt proud that I am working there at this moment. And after that, knowing little bit of history, my respect for the church grew, not the possessiveness. And I repeat it. The possessiveness for the church was there, but the respect for the church grew. I come to understand today this church has a very great religious, social, ecumenical impact, as Bishop said. Truly, this has catered so many Christians belonging to different denominations. So now I am very much convinced this church has got a religious history, it has got a local history, it has got a global history, and certainly I am sure all will agree it has got an ecumenical history, where Jesus may really be very happy to know all his children coming together because of this Bona Morte. So my dear fathers, sisters, professors, and my dear brothers, I wish you all the best. May the discovery help us to know the holiness of this church more and more. May this church become an inspiration for us to work together. In a very special way, I thank Wei for taking a great effort. In a way, I was a discouragement for her. I was not pushing her very much, but my goodness, she was pushing me too much, and I was supporting a little bit. And Wei, I am really grateful to you for making this occasion. I am sure it will become a success. So already the tone is set, and wish you all the best. Let us all be enriched by the presentations, by our sharing. God bless you all and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Father Ratnam. You have already triggered a high curiosity among the audience. So now we are about to start the first panel of the workshop. So let's welcome the first four presenters of the panel to the platform.
We can move. Can you call the name so that we can come? Call them by name.
So we welcome the chair and the commentator of Professor Dr. Father M.O. Zhuang from Kottayam, and then Mr. Prabhu Mihinduku Lasuria from Colombo Theological Seminary, and Mr. Sujit George from Chennai to the platform, please. Meanwhile, I'd like to explain the structure of the program. So now we have first two presentations until 10 to 11 o'clock. Then we will have 20 minutes of tea break. And within each presentation, we have 20 minutes for the individual presentation, and then we will start 20 minutes of comments and discussion. Now the floor is open.
Good morning to all of you, and loving greetings. It's a beautiful, wonderful morning, and we are all here in this pleasant atmosphere. When I entered the campus in the morning, the Holy Mass was going on there in the chapel. That was so pleasant to participate in that, or to hear that, and have a glimpse of that. And now we had a beautiful inaugural session. The Major General, the Supreme Commandant of the Sri Lankan Army was here, and he greeted all of us. And after that, the blessed presentation by His Eminence Dr. Yohanan Dimitri Dioscoros, and then the presentation by the Reverend Father, and now we are all here for the first academic session. Galileo is the one who said that the world is round. That was in the Middle Ages, in the 15th century. But there was somebody in the 4th and the 5th century, some philosophers, they said that the world is round, not flat. The understanding of that time was the world is flat and it is created by God. And now somebody who doesn't have a good sense is coming forward and telling that the world is round. And there were scholars, Christian scholars, they said that according to the Bible, the world is not round. It is four corners. It got four corners and fixed on the pillars. That is how the cosmographer Moses said about the world. And then there were some people who wanted to prove that the world is not round. One of that eminent person of that time in the 5th century and lived up to the 6th century was Cosmas. His name is Cosmas. He is an Alexandrian merchant. He wanted to take a trip to the whole corners of the world at that time. He traveled up to the east, he traveled up to the west, and to the south and the north. And he said that I could not find that the world is round. It is flat. When I traveled into the east, I could travel straight. And after his travel, he is the first one who traveled into India at that time. So he got the name Indicopleustes. Indicopleustes means one who traveled into India. That is how he is Cosmos Indicopleustes. After his traveling, he wrote a book that is the Christian topography. In that Christian topography, he wrote that I traveled into the east to the Malabar coast where pepper grows. There I found Christians. And there is a group of community of Christians in Taprobane. Taprobane is the modern Sri Lanka. The Ceylon. He said that I found a Christian community there in Taprobane, in the east. He wanted to prove that the biblical verse. He said, Jesus said that the word will spread up to the end of the world. The disciples will go to the end of the world. So Ceylon, India, were the end of the world, eastern part of the world. And he said that in the east I could find Christian community there. That was the 5th century. There were Christians in Taprobane, in Ceylon, in modern Sri Lanka. And there were Christians in India. And that was the Oriental Christianity in the 5th century. Itself, Christian communities were there. And they traces their history back to St. Thomas. St. Thomas was the great missionary of these eastern parts. From Jerusalem to the east, to the end of the world. St. Thomas had 2 missionary journeys. And in these missionary journeys, he founded churches there. Because of political reasons, because of some other calamities, because of Western political and commercial inversions, these Christianity become extinct, become small groups. In the Middle Ages, Roman Catholic missionaries came here. They also founded the ancient Christian communities here, and they founded new churches in India, Ceylon, and you must understand that the geographical situation of that time, India, Ceylon, Burma, and all these parts, Pakistan, Afghanistan, these were all one countries, one region, not as separate countries as now. So all these areas, there were Christian communities, the Oriental Christian communities. Now we have a paper presentation, Oriental Christianity in Ceylon, from the Persian Christians to the Malankara Syrian Orthodox Church. That is the topic of this first discussion. So, this was considered as one church. The church was not divided at that time. Saint Thomas, he is the founder of church in Persia, in Ceylon or Sri Lanka, in Burma. He traveled up to Malacca and China. In India, all these eastern regions were considered as one and founded by one person. That is, the church is one. There were communion, there were contacts. One bishop or two bishops, or at that time in the Middle Ages there were 250 bishops in the Persian church. All these 250 bishops, they were divided into different dioceses. That is from Jerusalem up to these areas. That is the Oriental Christianity which we can see. Let us hear more about that Oriental Christianity, and we'll have more discussion on that. And then only the developments in the later years, in the later centuries. Let us have the first presentation. That is the Persian Christians and the Anuradhapura period by Mr. Prabhu Mihidu Kulasurya. Yeah, please.
Holy Fathers and Holy Mothers, dear friends, I feel deeply honored to be among you this morning and share with you the fruits of my research, which was actually originally conducted in order to write an article for a Festschrift in celebration of the 70th birthday of my senior colleague at the Colombo Theological Seminary, Professor G.P.V. Somaratna, who is with us here and who will be speaking to you later. And I was able to present an abbreviated version of that article at the Royal Asiatic Society conference, which is a very interesting experience for me, with a rather hostile audience, quite opposed to accepting that there was Christian presence prior to the colonial period in Sri Lanka. And subsequently I've been able to accumulate more information, and I'm happy to make this presentation to you. While I set up my PowerPoint presentation here, let me just introduce myself. I wonder how that multimedia projector is activated.
Yes,
Okay. So make sure I open the right one.
And then meanwhile, we distribute the program, so be patient,
Okay.
please.
Wonderful. Here we go. So, as you heard, my name is Prabhu Mihidu Surya. I understand that that is a difficult name to wrap your tongue around. I teach at the Colombo Theological Seminary. I teach theology and history, and I've just submitted my PhD thesis to the University of Colombo, and I am awaiting their word on my work. So let me start off. In 1912, archaeologists visiting the citadel of the ancient capital of Anuradhapura were baffled by the discovery of a column fragment and an engraving of a stylized cross. Commissioner Edward Ayrton immediately assumed that it was and I quote, probably of the Portuguese period, end of quote, having originally, quote, belonged to some Christian building at Anuradhapura itself, end of quote. 12 years later, Henry Codrington, a Syriac scholar familiar with the literature and iconography of the Oriental Orthodox tradition, identified its provenance as Persian and Nestorian, as he referred to it. However, in 1954, there were many changes that took place in the political climate of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka became more of a nationalist, Buddhist, ideologically motivated academic community. And this was reflected in a paper that was presented by the then Assistant Commissioner of Archaeology, D.T. Devendra, at a Royal Asiatic Society meeting, where he completely challenged the pre-Portuguese provenance of this artifact. Devendra expressed skepticism about the artifact's Persian origin and argued for a Portuguese derivation from the 17th century. Devendra's skepticism was based on two key points. Firstly, he argued that the Christian topography of Cosmas Indicopleustes, the sole documentary source for the presence of a Persian Christian community in 6th century Lanka, was historically unreliable. Secondly, he argued that the cross depicted fleur-de-lis, indicative of a European influence, specifically French. Devendra's position was immensely influential. To this day, the display label for the column fragment at the Anuradhapura Museum reads, Nestorian cross, circa 6th century to 16th century AD, a vagary of 1,000 years. On one point, Devendra was right. Cosmas is the sole documentary source attesting to the presence of Persian Christians in the Anuradhapura period. Much depends upon the historical reliability of the Christian topography. The Alexandrian provenance of the writings was convincingly established by Milton Anastos from internal evidence in 1946. Yet very little is known about the author himself. His name does not appear in the oldest extant manuscript, Vaticanus Greciae 699, and its earliest witness, Photius, a Byzantine writer in the 9th century, classifies the work simply as the book of a Christian. Later manuscripts name the author as Cosmas the monk and Cosmas Indicopleustes. If Cosmas was not the author's real name, a popular Coptic name attested by the fact that 3 Alexandrian patriarchs were named Cosmas, he could very well have been actually named Cosmas, but even if he was not, it may have been derived from his subject matter, the structure of the cosmos, and his special qualification to speculate on it, from his having explored as far as the northwestern coast of India. The work's cosmography is idiosyncratic, to say the least. Based on a hyper-literalist interpretation of Hebrews 9:23 to 24, Cosmas sought to demonstrate from the Bible geographic exploration and the common sense observation of phenomena that, contrary to the pagan and even many Christian scholars, such as John Philoponus, the earth was flat and resembled the biblical tabernacle and its furnishings. Despite the flawed visualization of the cosmos, the writer's historical and geographical material has steadily earned the confidence of scholars in the cumulative light of corroborative evidence on early medieval seafaring and maritime trade networks in the Indian Ocean. There has been a huge amount of research that has been done about this period and about and into travel documents and so on, and a lot of archaeological material that has confirmed the work of Cosmas in so far as his historical and geographical material is concerned. Cosmas claimed that the first-hand information he gained from voyagers for commercial purposes in 3 of these gulfs, the Roman, that is the Mediterranean Sea, the Arabian, that is the Red Sea, and the Persian, was supplemented by inquiries from the natives or from seafaring men, through whom he obtained accurate information regarding the different places. Moreover, scholars are agreed that Book 11, which contains the most substantial notice about Taprobani, the Greco-Roman name for Lanka, is almost certainly an addendum from Cosmas's lost work on geography, written prior to the topography. For the information in Book 11, Cosmas vouched that all these matters I have described and explained, partly from personal observation and partly from accurate inquiries which I made when in the neighborhood of different places, with regards to the reliability of the Taprobani account in particular, classical historian, the late Patrick Virakodi, who taught in the University of Peradeniya, stated, and a good Catholic mind you, stated that the cumulative evidence suggests that Cosmas had a more realistic appreciation of the maritime activities of the island in his time than modern skeptics would allow. He added, the description which Cosmas gives of Taprobani corresponds in many details with what we know of contemporary conditions in Sri Lanka. So remarkable is the correspondence that some have thought he actually visited the island. But the reality seems to be that he was dependent on other sources, such as Sopattros, whom he quotes, and others, who had personal experience of the land. Of great importance to the credibility of Cosmas's information on Persian Christians in the island was his direct contact with the eminent Persian clergyman whom he knew as Patricius, whom Cosmas met during this Patricius's tour of Alexandria and Byzantine and so on, and who later became Ma'aba Catholicos of the Persian Church. The Persian influence is certainly detectable in Book 2, where the relative distance of the land and sea trade routes to China are discussed from a Persian perspective. And the name given to China are not the usual Greek names such as Ceres or Sinai, but Sinistan, derived from the Persian Sinistan, as attested in the Strean Nestorian monument. During the expansionist reign of Khusrau I, who reigned from 531 to 579, the Persians effectively eliminated their Alexandrian and Ethiopian competitors out of the Indian Ocean market. The Byzantine historian Procopius famously marked this transition by noting how the Persian merchants always located themselves at the very harbors where the Indian ships first put in, since they inhabit the adjoining country, which is Persia, and are accustomed to buying the entire cargo, leaving nothing for their Alexandrian and Aksumite competitors. It was in this period too that Lanka emerged as an entrepot on the Silk Road of the sea, with its own ventures into seaborne trade. As Cosmas accurately described, from the whole of India, Persia and Ethiopia, the island, acting as intermediary, welcomes many ships and likewise dispatches them. From regions of the interior, that is Sinista, China, and other markets, it imports silk, aloes, cloves, clove wood, sandalwood, and all native products. And it exports and it re-exports them to the people of the exterior, that is to Mali and to Kalyana, similarly to Sindhu, and to Persia, Himyarite country, Yemen, and Adulis, Ethiopia. Archaeological excavations in Sri Lankan sites such as Manthai, Tissa Maharama, and Anuradhapura have yielded an abundance of durable Sasanian trade goods, especially the ubiquitous bitumen-sealed torpedo jars evidently used to store or transport a variety of perishable liquid products such as oils, perfumed oils, or wine. Judging by their occurrence at monastic sites in Anuradhapura, it is highly probable that they often contain substances used in votive offerings or the preparation of medicines. As the Persians were determined to maintain dominance over the entrepot trade of the region, their operations in Sri Lanka would have necessitated a variety of commercial skills and personnel. As Wahlberg explains, entrepot trade called for a large number of expatriate merchants whose long-term presence on the island was essential for maximizing opportunities for sustainable profit. Besides the immediate exchange of goods, information concerning offers and orders for the following year could be collected here. Obviously, trade between reliable business partners who had known each other for many years was much more convenient and secure than trade between unknown and constantly changing clients. These practical motivations would naturally have led to the formation of the resident Persian community on the island. The activities of mercantile communities also appear to have shown some resilience against the political transitions of the island. Noting the enigmatic occurrence of trade goods at a period when the city of Anuradhapura itself appears to have been in decline, Stein et al. Conclude that the island's international networks of trade and exchange were powerful enough to continue functioning until the very end of the city itself, which was around 1017, at which time its merchants and traders presumably shifted their allegiance to other more successful emporia. The Nestorian Chronicle of Sirt mentions 3 events which reflect developments among the Christian communities, both local, Indian and expatriate Persian, connected with the church in Persia. First, a Bishop Dodi of Basra, around the 3rd or 4th century, is said to have sailed to India, where he made many converts. Second, Yazdegerd I, reigning from 399 to 421, the Shah of Persia, reportedly sent Catholicos Ahai to Fars on the Red Sea. On account of the merchandise and pearls transported in ships from India and China, which Nauruz, governor of Fars, claimed to have been pillaged by pirates. So the Shah was suspicious about this report, and he sent, and his choice of emissary, of an investigator, was the Christian patriarch, to handle the investigation, and it indicates that the Christian merchant communities were known to have established themselves in the Indian Ocean trade. This is confirmed by the testimonial of the Persian monk Abraham of Kashgar, who lived from 492 to 586, who narrates, "I was a merchant of the number of those who trade and travel on the sea. It happened to us that on our way back from the country of the Indians, our ship broke up, and while the seamen were preparing it, I went to the island where it was anchored," presumably an island in the Red Sea, in the Persian Gulf. The ship was full of people to the number of 300. Finally, in the late 5th century, Mane, metropolitan of Fars, is said to have composed Pahlavi Madrashe, Memre, and Enyane, discourses, homilies, and antiphons, and sent these books to the islands of the sea and to India for liturgical use. These fragmentary accounts reflect the growth of Christian communities in India. By the mid-6th century, these groups appear to have gained a level of ecclesiastical cohesion under the Catholicos of Seleucia Ctesiphon, when Cosmas lists the different territories and nations where the Christians lived, in order to demonstrate how the whole earth has been filled with the doctrine of the Lord Jesus Christ. He begins with the remotest of these known Christian communities in the east, in Taprobani, an island in inner India where the Indian Sea is. There is also a Christian church there, and clergy and faithful, but I do not know whether there are any further on. Similarly, in the place called Male, where pepper grows, and in the place called Kalyana, there is also a bishop ordained in Persia. Similarly, in the island called Dioscorides, Socotra, in the same Indian Sea, there the inhabitants speak Greek, since they are settlers of the Ptolemies, and there are clergy ordained in Persia and sent to those parts, and a community of Christians. There is much more information that I would like to share, which is contained in the paper that I have prepared for this occasion, and I will make that available for you.
Thank you very much for the beautiful presentation. It gives a glimpse to the history of the church in Taprobane and in some other places of the eastern region of Christianity. It's a beautiful presentation, and now I would like to call upon Mr. Sujit George for the presentation. Was Independent Catholic Church. After each presentation, there would be a discussion also, question and answer, clarifications after each presentation. So after that only, we will have some time, 10 minutes for the discussion, and the floor is open for that. And after that only the presentation of Mr. Sujit Chor comes. So now the floor is open. Any clarifications, questions? You already explained that he will give more details later. But for what he had presented now, any clarification or discussion or questions? Yeah. You have to press and hold while you speak.
So, you said about the Anuradhapura community, possibility of an Anuradhapura community. Just imagine, on the other side of the Gulf of Mannar, there is a place called Kayalpattanam in Indian side. Now it is not a port, it's a 100% Muslim area now. But there is a strong chance, or more or less certain, that it was a port. Of course, it was geographically known once, and it was a Christian-dominated area, and that Christian community was of St. Thomas origin. Did you find any connection in between these two during your research? Thank you.
Yeah, one would expect to find evidence of a possible connection on the opposite coast, which is in the location of Mannar. And yes, indeed, in 1984, just before the war broke out, there was a excavation done by the British archaeologist John Carswell in a place called Manthai. Although he did his research in 1984, the publication of his findings was delayed until about 2012, I believe. But one very significant finding that came out of that excavation was a very simple object. It was a clay seal, a sealing actually. A seal is generally worn on your finger or on your neck. It's a stamp of authority. But this is a sealing. It's a clay, lump of clay with 3 clay seals. And it's extremely important because it proves the Persian Christian connection, because it has a Pahlavi inscription and a Oriental Orthodox cross, much simpler in its rendition than the Anuradhapura pillar cross. But let me give you an enlargement of that. So this is another picture of that clay bulla. And that is the depiction of the cross. It's set in a diamond field. This is a close-up of it. You can see the bifurcated terminations of the cross with in the liturgies and in the hymnody are actually pearls at the termination of the cross. And this has stylistic similarities to the Anuradhapura cross itself, because the terminations of the cross are not fleur-de-lis. You could see that in the carving they are quite disconnected from the terminations of the cross. They're sitting on it, or bearing fruit from the branches of the cross. And this has been a significant find which confirms the connection with Persia, because of the Pahlavi inscription and the similarity with the Anuradhapura cross.
Yeah, I would like to clarify one more thing, that there are similar crosses. This is known as the Persian cross or the Nestorian cross, and 5 of these crosses are in South India. One in Mylapore, 2 in Kottayam, and the other 2 places, Kadamattam and Mattuchura, nearby Kottayam. There are 5 crosses in India also, the similar crosses of the same period, maybe of the 8th century or the 9th century. Crosses are these, and there are inscriptions in Pahlavi language, almost the same thing. Yeah, yes.
So you mentioned about Kalyana in Persia. May I know more about that, please?
Just not Kalyana in Persia.
Yeah.
Cosmos. Sir mentioned at the end. Sir mentioned that one, so I asked.
Yes, Cosmas mentions several places by name where he received reports that there were Christian communities. Let's see if I can find the place. Yes, Kalyana, and in book, actually he gives a more detailed description in book 11, where he talks about Kalyana, possibly Kalyan near Bombay. That's what commentators interpret it as. Male, which had 5 pepper exporting emporia, Party, Mangarut, Salopatana, Nalopatana, and Pudapatana, which are all grey-sized terms, obviously. He was trying to transcribe the names as they heard it, which may not be accurate. So these might be Malayankara near Krangado or Kulam Male, Quilon, and places like that. So, yeah.
Maybe Kalyan nearby Bombay or Kollam. That is South India, South Kerala.
Kerala also there is.
Yeah.
Not
Kalyanpur.
Yes. Sir.
Mr. Meedpurasuri, could you tell me whether you attach any importance to Parnavitana's recantations on the presence of Christian clergy in Kasyap's court, and about Oggalana having converted to Christian?
Yes. So in the 1970s, there was a very eminent Sri Lankan archaeologist by the name of Senarat Parnavitana, who he was a very skilled epigraphist, but for some enigmatic reason, he claimed to have discovered interlinear inscriptions, that is, inscriptions in between other inscriptions in different parts of the country that he put together and came up with the story that there was a Christian, Nestorian monk who visited the ancient capital of Sigiriya, which was sort of in between the two big capitals, and converted a number of the people in the court and had some influence in building churches in that area and so on. The problem is that no epigraphist apart from Parnavitana has ever been able to read those so-called interlinear inscriptions, including Parnavitana's own students. And the document itself, which he produced in Pali as the original source text, his deciphering of those many interlinear inscriptions, has been studied in detail, and Patrick Virakodi, in fact, in Taprabani, the book about the Greek and Roman view of records of Sri Lanka, spots a number of anachronisms in the text, which, according to Virakodi, are evidence that this was a fabricated document. So no historian worth his salt takes much notice of that particular document, but there is a section in Sri Lanka that place a lot of credibility on this, and in fact have built virtually like a museum based on this story. But it's very difficult for historians to take that document seriously. I have an article in Virakodi's book where he gives great detail about why he thinks this document is not credible. I'm happy to share that with you.
Yeah, there is only one more question possible because of the time and the punctuality. We have to keep one more interaction. Otherwise, yeah.
I'm Father Kurupura Surya. My doctorate thesis was Ionian, where then we want also to mention about Strean's Historian of the Rise, which also speaks and clear documents of movement from Sri Lanka to Rome during the time of the birth of Christ. So those points will help you to see how the Romans used to come there, have their ports, plus the Greeks. We have Greek coins found in Sri Lanka. So all those things were mentioned. I hope you have already done in your paper. Then speaking of Parmenicana, I studied that both is a story of Sigria and Greek and the Mauryas. And one particular word that he has mentioned is a very important word, Abhishek Jina, which means Christ victor, Christos Diki. So that particular word is found in the Mahansa, where he mentions that. So these are quite two points with Ireland, all these researchers, and I did also study on those crosses because I had to do catacomb studies. So in the catacombs we have found all these. So I deny the fact it is a Persian cross. It is a cross that is coming down from the catacombs in various ways and come to Persia and then come, not to just make a Persian cross and identify it only for them. It is a universal cross developed in itself. All these parts are there in the catacombs. Thank you.
Yeah, the name Persian cross was given only by the colonial time to distinguish between the Latin cross, the Oriental cross, and the Persian cross. That distinction and the name was given only in the colonial period. So one thing is very clear. Before the colonial period, there were strong Christian communities in India and in Sri Lanka, not only in the shore, in the seashores, but in the inner places also. It is very clear. Before the colonial period, there were strong Christian communities in these areas. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation and the interaction. Now we will hear from Mr. Sujit Varghese. Yeah, Mr. Sujit George Varghese. He works as sales manager in Chennai. He holds a postgraduate diploma in leadership from the Henley Management College, and he is one of the members which our Metropolitan Madhyaskoros appointed as in the research team of the Diocese of Madras, Malangara Orthodox Church. He is presenting a paper was Independent Catholic Church, a revival of Orthodox St. Thomas Christians in Ceylon. Let us hear. We cannot read the password, isn't it?
I can't see here. No, I can't see the conclusion. So is the conclusion already? I can't see it here.
Yeah, no, it's correct.
I want to. Yeah. Good morning, respected meeting, respected fathers, sisters, and brothers and sisters. It's a great privilege for me to stand here and discuss about some of the few findings that I have come across when studying out of interest on the history of our church and the connection with Sri Lanka. I'm not a scholar as eminent scholars are. I'm basically a sales manager, so I sell products.
and ideas.
Cosmos was also a merchant.
Faith may not be products, it's ideas also.
So my way of presentation would be a little different than you would come across normally in a scholarly discussion. Right? So the question that I posed myself was that the Independent Catholic Mission, a revival of St. Thomas Christians in Ceylon. Because we know very well that St. Thomas Christians do exist here, and we heard a lot of proof from my previous presenter. I would go through some of those points in two parts. The first part, if we would look at St. Thomas Christians, some of the proofs which I thought was not discussed much in detail. So that I would like to bring it forward for discussion. Then on the second part, to look at some of the evidence where the Independent Catholic Mission is actually a revival of St. Thomas Christians, or this group did have any kind of idea of what they were doing, or do they think that it was their church before, or are they connecting to them, or that is what we would look at. So those are the two parts. Okay. Before that, as you know mostly about a brief history of Malankara Orthodox Church, so I would firstly go through that. Established by St. Thomas in 1st century, remained a unified church covering various places of India, inclusive of Ceylon, till starting of 15th century, till the advent of Portuguese, led to an enforced domination of Roman Catholicism over the Church of St. Thomas Christians. 1653, through an oath, we overthrew the enforced subjection and resolved to restore our freedom as a Church of India, to revive the Oriental Church heritage and indigenous characteristics. So the Church is fully self-governed by its local leadership and is indigenous. There is no foreign leadership allowed in the Church. The elements of self-awareness was one of the key points for St. Thomas Christians wherever they existed. Some of them was able to come up with a strong voice, protest against any of the enforcements that were put on them. Some of them could not, so they migrated to other places, escaping the so-called prosecution. So when I look at all those papers which refers to references starting from 2nd century onwards about Christianity in Indian subcontinent, there is always a doubt, or there is always a question thrown: is it subcontinent India or Arabia Phoenix? So many of this many of those papers or scholars conclude that it is actually Arabia Felix. So it depends upon what type of geographical knowledge that was available at that point of time when these travels were made and when those actual documents were written. So with the Roman conquest of Egypt, which happened in 1st century BC, Romans actively entered the field of spice trade. So they broke completely the Arab monopoly. So when they could do that at that time, that means they could come to South India, Ceylon, and even go up to China. They should have some kind of geographical knowledge even before that. So that's when you come across somebody who has mentioned or studied, traveled long, that is Strabo. So he lived from 63 BC to 24 AD. So he drew up a map at that point of time, much before the Christian era, and it looked like this. And it very, very clearly differentiates between Arabia and India. Yeah, of course, the world was flat at that time, that's why the map looked like this. So, the end of civilized world was considered to be Ceylon or Toboggan. And then during his time. So that's why it ended with India. And Arabia, Felix, is mentioned separately there. So anybody as a commoner or as a navigator who was driving the ships through the seas knows where the Arabia Felix is and where India is and where Toboggan is. So that should not be a doubt. Okay, so before 1st century, it took, for example, from Persia to come down to Malabar about 92 days. People didn't have knowledge about voyage in high seas, so they traveled along the coast, and it took 92 days to come here from Persia to Calicut, for example. Then they discovered this Hippolytus wind. So Hippolytus wind, it was in 45 AD onwards. They go to a particular place, then the monsoon, the wind comes, and in a year they could take this wind. With the help of the wind, they could directly reach South India, and it reduced the number of days from 92 to nearly 40 days. So that actually doubled and tripled the number of the trade connections between Alexandria, Persia, and through Nile up till Europe. There is also evidence that Indians were present in Egypt. Alexandria was a chief port of Egypt for Indian commerce and trade before the emergence of Constantinople. Alexandria was the main part of Roman Empire. Many goods flooded the markets of Alexandria because the Indian goods were carried by Indian traders to Alexandria, and after that the goods were mainly carried by Arabians into the land. It was directly linked also to the Roman part of Austria and Italy. There's a handful of little known fragments of inscriptions in Indian languages which are found in Egypt, so which dates back to earlier centuries. This includes records of Red Sea port in Quizir, one in Parkit, and two old Tamil whose linguistic features point towards South India as a place of origin for Indian merchants in Egypt. So this is the proof that is available already, which points that merchants from South India traveled to Egypt, and the evidence is very much there. Then we have a clue in the archaeological excavation of Oxyrhynchus about the Christianity in South India. This is a small or a country town about 100 miles down from Cairo. So with Romans coming to Egypt, it became a Greek country. Okay. So then 10 years of digging actually got almost 1 lakh fragments of papers. This was a part of Egypt where they did not receive any kind of rainfall. So like a garbage dump, all of this paper was preserved. So when they started digging and recovering these papers, they could even read the letters of what was written. So enormous number of data, starting from 30 volumes, now it has run to 83 volumes of evidence of writings that has been discovered from this archaeological site. Yeah, so it has got at least 2 church buildings at that point of time, this particular town, and it had also a bishop. And the Christian population was 80%, and it went up to 90% in towards 4th century. It's a particular document, POC 413, called Chariton Mine. This mine talks about, it's a drama which is written, and it dates about 2nd century AD, where in this place there were theatres, and it was a major stop for traders to come, stay, and then travel further. So they have theatres where they would play the dramas and they could enjoy, and there were different type of plays that were available. In one of the plays, in his research, Mr. T. Zedmani, he has mentioned on identifying South Indian languages which were not decoded up till now. Only this drama was written partly in Greek and partly in South Indian languages. So the South Indian languages were not decoded before. Now it has been decoded. That means he has identified about 37 Sanskrit words, 15 Malayalam words, 15 Hebrew words, 2 Aramic words, 6 Greek words, 2 common words between Greek, Aramic and Hebrew. Yeah, even 32 words are still not interpreted. But these words gives a lot of proof and evidence about what was happening or what was known to those traders at that time. The scene is in Musiris, which is the port, okay, which is a part of Chera Kingdom in ancient Kerala. The worshippers of the scene are St. Thomas Christians. There is an officer who is in charge of the celebration of the drama. Okay. Masuru, that's a royal drum which brings out the mystical drum. So the sound, which in those days we don't have bells, so the drums were used. A bishop in Kerala is respected like a king. Bishop's residence is called Aramana, so that means king's palace, even now. The church is called Thermanna. It's a house of prayer. Christian faith was adopted to many Hindu practices. Besavios, a foreign bishop, was there, and his tongue, or the native tongue, was Greek. So he gives episcopal blessings at the end of the worship, which is even now the tradition in the church. So this document actually shows a scene where St. Thomas Christians are worshipping, and how worship is going on, and how and there was a bishop, and how it gives more details, but I'm not going much into that. It is there in the paper, which you can which will be shared with you, where you can read more. Then the second source is coming from 4th century. It's regarding a Christian monk. Again in the island, this is in Ceylon. It says, Yonan, the anchorite Anba, who should have been of Cypriot origin, if we believe to the hagiographer Sedai, the priest and the hermit, head of monastery of St. Thomas in country of India, whose seat is set in the country of Poitiers in Ceylon, the Black Island, and who presents himself of Ma Yunan, the holy monk had met Mar Agwin or Augen in Egypt. We should know who Mar Augen was. Mar Augen was the saint who introduced monasticism into Mesopotamia. Okay. In his early life, he was part of the monastery of Pachomius. So he got his early education from them, and then he led his disciples to Mesopotamia, where he established many monasteries, and Mount Isla is one of the famous monasteries which he established. And there were 350 monks who lived with Mar Agwin. And they were told, and they were given a cross, and they were told to go to different parts of the world and form monasteries there. So there is also evidence that this was a practice in 4th century, 5th centuries of Persian monks going to different areas and establishing monasteries. Coming to early 15th century, we have another evidence in the narratives of Joseph the Indian, which clearly, even more descriptive way, says about the practices, the church architecture, how the church ecclesiastics was at that point of time. It even mentions that ordination, for any ordination, they have to go to Persia to get the ordination. Yeah. So it says these people have a great or high priest, and around him there were 12 cardinals, or cardinals in the term means corpus corpus, to be rightly translated. 2 patriarchs and many archbishops and bishops. So do all Christians in India and those kingdoms in China. So he also mentions up to China. So with the advent of Portuguese, what happened? First, we took a very friendly nature towards St. Thomas Christians at first. Even now, the bishops, Bishop Mar Jacob went and met, and we had trade relationship with the Portuguese, and we cut off our relations with Moors. So this, similar was the situation in Ceylon. So we have evidence that up till 1544 AD, there was a group of St. Thomas Christians in Ceylon requesting details about requesting to Portuguese authorities that they need baptism and that they need priests to come to their place. So what I have done after this in the paper is to look at a social change model. The social change model can be split into 5 ingredients. One is the burning platform, one is the compelling narrative, one is agitators, friends, and solution. So this whole incident that is coming up to social change with the advent of Portuguese and the suppression of the native church can be brought under these 5 ingredients and then brought into a conclusion. The same model has been applied further in Indian Catholic Mission on what happened there, and seeing the results of comparing how the results are with the incident of Kunan Cross Oath. So this talks about Padre Alvarez, and I will jump to the formation of Padrado Defense Association. So here there was a meeting in 1886 on 21st October, where Father Alvarez described Rome as a cause of all evils and sufferings of Indian Church. Now, what does he mean, the Indian Church? So that, so he was a person who was a great orator. He was a great journalist. He did publish many books. So he was well read in history. He said there was no requirement of any European clergy, French, Italian, or Portuguese, were wanted in India, because all for 1,500 years the church survived with native priests. And why now Europeans were required? So he was also aware of the intolerances that were put on Greek, German, and Scandinavian, English, and Scottish churches, and how they broke away and formed from the Roman Church and formed their own churches. So with all this happening, even the apostolic delegate at that point of time, he said, today the Lenten revolt is not a religious question, but rather a partisan revolt. So Indian Catholic Mission, when it was officially declared on 11th February 1888, at that time it was not known to Malankara Orthodox Church at all. We don't have any evidence of this. It was in 1887 that Father Alvarez visited Ceylon. He first time he visited Ceylon. That was the time when he tours complete Ceylon, goes to every churches, and he gets an idea of how many churches, how many people are there. On 14th March 1888, till that time, this group of people or the community was trying very hard to get their rights recognized by the Roman Church. So they sent their best person, Dr. Lisboa Pinto, to Lisbon to make their case. So when that was not heard, that was when they came to the burning platform. Actually burned so much that they had to jump off. And they jumped off, and for 17 months they closed the churches without any priests. So during this time they searched for solutions. And that's how we find this first official letter that came from Independent Catholic Mission to Mar Dionysius, who was the Malankara Metropolitan at that time, on 6th June 1888. So this letter mentions that there are about 10,000 Christians in India and Ceylon who have excluded from Padrado. Silva says that Indian Catholic Mission Christians in Ceylon are without sacraments, and there are about 25 churches which has been closed for 17 months. He says that we have come to this decision after mature deliberations. It says that Father Alvarez and Dr. Pinto had already met Mar Dionysius. So after March 1888, between June was the first meeting. In between we don't have any evidence of meeting. So then there is a written letter from Mar Dionysius saying that it is unnecessary to repeat here again the pains I am undergoing to help you are already informed in the same by the esteemed friends Reverend Alvarez. Some of my subordinate bishops have entertained the doubtful opinion that your application may be a mere artful attempt to procure consecration from the Syrian Church. But I have tried to remove all feelings and suspicion, reposing my full confidence in Reverend Alvarez and Dr. Pedro, whom I take to be honest gentlemen. At that point of time, Mar Dionysius also wrote to Apostolic Delegate of Roman Catholic Church that he was getting such kind of application from the Ceylon Christians and what he should do. He says, although I have successfully removed all feelings of suspicion, I would be very thankful if you can send me an application signed by leading representatives of various churches in Ceylon for the satisfaction of other bishops and the Syrian Association, on which I preside. So it was something that was not taken unanimously by one person. It was clearly discussed with all the bishops at that time. It was presented in the Malankara Syrian Association, and they had to accept it. And only after that, this acceptance was given. The letter says so. So there were several rounds of discussion with Mar Dionysius for a period of nearly 5 months. Finally, on August 15, 1888, Alvarez has been formally accepted into MOSC with the title of Apostolic Prefect. On 19th August, he lands in Colombo and then goes to Palimone and all these places. And this document which he had requested, when this document is made, the Indian Catholic Mission changes its name to Syrian Apostolic Mission of Ceylon. So that's one of the first things that you could see, that this community here could reinvent themselves to be a Syrian community. Changing the names from Independent Catholic Mission to Syrian Apostolic Mission, so that they were also knowing that they were part of St. Thomas Christian Church. We know that from the research of Reverend Dr. Mascarinus, that in his time also his grandmother had stories where they even told about that in Goa there were St. Thomas Christians and there was this Nestorian cross, and when Portuguese soldiers came, they used to hide the cross and keep it. Such one of those crosses were discovered by Father Costa recently, a few years back. The last one. Okay. So this after having submitted the complete signatures to Mar Dionysius, so Mar Dionysius sends 2 priests back to India to check the relevance of this, and then there is evidence of newspaper announcement of this visit. And here it says, who still cling to the church of their forefathers. So this is again another understanding of the community of people that they were joining back as St. Thomas Christians to the Malkara Orthodox Church when they asked or approached us. Yeah. So I conclude here. So more details are available in the paper, which I would share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sujit, for the wonderful presentation. The presentation contained 3 parts, as we know. One is the survey earlier of the early history before the colonial period, the mission of St. Thomas and the churches in different parts of India, Ceylon, and in the eastern regions. And then the second part was short, but it was a conflict between different missionary organizations. The Patrodo was there, and then the missionaries from France, Germany and other parts, that was also here. And then finally the move of Alvarez Julius. So now the floor is open. The propaganda and the Patruade conflict were there in the Middle Ages. We can clearly see that. Those who do not know about the Patruado, I would just mention about it. In the 15th century, Pope Nicholas V gave Portugal certain privileges and responsibilities through the program called Patruado. According to this, Portugal received political and commercial authority over all the nations of the east of Europe. But their initiative, they have to convert the people here into into Christianity, into the Roman Catholic Church. That was the privilege given to the Portuguese people. That is known as Patruado. But later, there were conflicts between the Portuguese authorities and Rome, and that reflects in the sending of Propaganda Fide and all these other missionary groups. This move, the missionary move by Bishop Alvarez, should be read in the background of this conflict. So, the floor is open. Yeah.
Thank you, Sujit, for this ambitious presentation covering 2,000 years of history in only 20 minutes. It's a great effort. And I would like to ask you the historical significance of the independent Catholic movement in Ceylon to the entire history of St. Thomas Christians. This is question 1. Question 2, I put to both presenters, Bravo and Sujit, this awareness of Oriental Church presence in Ceylon. How was it understood by churches, scholars, lay scholars, or religious historians in 19th century Ceylon? Because you mentioned that in your presentation, I think you were hinting that Father Alvarez was fully aware of this long tradition. And my question to you and to Bravo is that how this Oriental presence was understood historically by 19th century scholars. Thank you.
The first question? Once more.
This historical significance of independent Catholic movement in the history of St. Thomas Christians.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned about this social change model, so what I was trying to do was that to look at the Conan Purish oath and look at what are the incidents that happened, put it into this model and see how the solutions came and who were the friends and who are the main agitators and what happened as a result. And even though independent Catholic mission in Ceylon is a minute proportion of what was the population or the revolt that happened in Kerala, while comparing both, you could also see that here they developed a burning platform. So it came to a level where they had to jump off to a new solution. And when they jump off to a new solution, how innovative they are to provide the right solution which could go forward. So the significance is that even though it was a small group, they could do something for their own social change and create the awareness and move on with their strong ideologies. And this is something which we can learn from this incident and which can be adopted or which can be even seen in some places. And there was reasons why some did not succeed and some succeeded. And those are the comparisons that comes up. Second question, I think you can ask.
Well, I'm sure there are others who are more familiar with the survival of the Catholic Church through the Dutch period and so on, who could possibly comment on the ministry of Catholic believers from the Oriental Orthodox tradition who might have migrated or been transient residents on the western seaboard and so on. But as far as 19th century scholars are concerned, the wide consensus was that any Oriental Orthodox presence in the island of Sri Lanka had long ceased, and that there was no local or native resident population who formed a ecclesiastical polity that was ever recognized by the state, either in the Dutch or in the British period, that could be designated as Oriental Orthodox.
So would you say, sorry, a following question, would you say that in 19th century scholars or church leaders or laymen would not have a clear identity or association with the Oriental Church, Christianity in Ceylon?
Certainly the Anglican missionaries particularly were very open to establishing ecumenical relations with Oriental Orthodox presence, not only in Sri Lanka but wherever they went. But there is no one ever records that a continuing body of Oriental Orthodox believers who were native Ceylonese lived in the time when these scholars were investigating the presence of Christians.
Yeah, that's true. That after 16th century, there has been a gap when there was no presence of Oriental Christianity here. But when Britishers came here, they brought in people from Kerala and many other places to work in tea estates, rubber estates, and that's how the population started increasing again. And the knowledge and Ceylon or Colombo being well connected with the trade routes and others, there were always travelers here, and people in Colombo were well aware of what was happening in other places of the sea. This we can see in even the Independent Catholic Church, Catholic Church's paper, which they mention of a lot of incidents that's happening all around the world.
So according to the timetable, we have 10:50 the tea break.
Excuse me, that's it.
One more question is allowed.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
It's not a question. I would like to answer a question Dr. V asked to Sujit and he didn't answer. How the people see the independent Catholic movement in Ceylon or elsewhere by the Malankari Orthodox Church. See, in 1895, till 1895, the church was not at all think of about any kind of missionary activities because of the caste system. But in 1895, St. Gregorius of Parmala started or he advocated for missionary work among the people over there. So when the independent Catholic movement emerged with Mar Alvarez to the Penevalate mission, that time the people or the intellectuals think that it is an opportunity of the Malankara Church for a wide missionary work. And also the idea of Father Alvarez was early stated by a Malay priest from Kerala, but not Orthodox. He is a Roman Catholic. He is and died as a Roman Catholic. You might have heard about Father Paramakel Toman, who was accompanied with Bishop Cariati to Rome. In his lengthy book, Vartamana Pustakam, he argued what all Padravado propagators said 1 century later, including Mar Alvarez. That's all I said.
Okay, thank you very much. Both of the presentations in the morning, we had 2 presentations, one by Mr. Prabhu, Mikindu Ilasuria. So we pronounce that like that. Mr. Prabhu, thank you very much for your presentation. And Mr. Suchit, we have seen that Suchit George, he is a salesman, he is not a historian, he is not a theologian, he is not a priest, but he could present that wonderfully. Thank you very much, Sujit. We should appreciate you for that presentation and the work. And now we will break for tea. From 10:50 to 11:10 is the tea break, and then we will come back at 11:10. Thank you.
also Strean and
I'm Sister Helen Lambert, a Salvatorian sister, staying at Halfdup, Dr. Sebastian Parish Church. I'm so interested to know the one of the church's history better than
I'm Sister Paula from Pakistan, and I stayed in Telangana for study. I'm studying and come here and I'm Sister Vasantini, a Salvatorian sister. I live in the Bonamata Church for 6 months. So I like to come and listen to you all. Really, it's the origin of our church. I also like to know. I'm Sister Devi from Woodland. I'm Salvatorian sister. And now I am studying. I'm Sister Asura, belongs to Salvatorian congregation.
I am Samuel Saju from Canada, based in Colombo, but sort of almost
Next.
I'm Nisha, a member of living in.
I'm Abraham Alexander, member of the Banana Orthodox Church. I live in Sri Lanka. I'm working in the airport.
I'm Thomas. I'm part of the Banana Orthodox Church based in Bangalore. Work with the
I am K.M.A. from Chennai, next to Maragram Orthodox Church.
I'm Sajil Kurratna, as the marketing manager, and the CEO is from Rohani. I am from
Father.
Thank you.
I'm a Dilasa brother, Devotion Pereira, working as a teacher, education mission.
I am Noah Thomas. I'm Dushanta Rodrigo. This center is part of my parish because I live and work right now at St. Paul on the same road, Paul Kinsey Road. And I'm here because Sujit has invited me and I wanted to see what he has up his sleeve. I'm not too sure whether I want to take over my parish or not. So I'm cautiously listening to everything that is going on this morning.
Ignatius Particular Senior, parish priest of the Methodist Church, Devadagoda. 30 years ago, I was at Bonamata.
I'm Father Sixtus Kurukula Surya. I have been working in the archives of Colombo Diocese for a quite long time, studying the various history of churches, and people come to me to find about their groups and how their churches started off with groups. So that was my main area, but I have been involved in so I help Father Ignatius Varnal-Singham on the research of Bonamorte Church, the historical background also document here.
My name is Kamala. I was the professor of history, modern history in the University of Colombo. Now I'm working at Colombo Church.
I'm Father Jayaraj. I belong to Anglican Diocese. Station at St. Stephen Church, Nigam.
I'm Ramesh Nonis, history lecturer attached to the Department of Islamic Culture and Christian Culture, University of Caledonia, Sri Lanka. And I'm here, Dr. Ray and Dr. Alvalakalla, as in my point.
I'm Vijay George, belongs to Malangara Orthodox Strean Church. I was in last 5 years here. I was working here.
I'm Father Rajesh Rosario from India. I belong to Roman Catholic Diocese of Mangalore. I teach in the seminary. I teach theology.
I am Mark Bilimoria. I am from the Anglican Church of Ceylon, Diocese of Colombo.
I am Margaret Vikramasinghe, a medical doctor, but with a particular history, interest in history, and particularly interested in the Malankara Orthodox Church. I have mentioned this in my book on being Anglican, available at Vijitha Yapas.
I am Father Arul Das from Tamil Nadu, India. I am actually teaching in the college, Arts and Science College, St. James College, Tiruchirappalli. I am the vice principal there, and I am also the head of the Department of History. Plus, I am taking care of our archives, Jesuit Malay province, that is Tamil Nadu, whole Tamil Nadu Jesuit province. So I am taking care of our archives also. So when I was approached to present a paper on Patradu and propaganda, all those things, they were brought to present. So I accepted it. Very happy to be here.
I am Father Lawrence David Krashner, belongs to one of the mission center of Father Alvarez at Brahmawar. We are companies, we are 4 here, and belongs to Malankara Orthodox Church, Brahmawar Diocese. And
my name is Wei Zhang. My Chinese name is Jiang Wei. I work in University of Bonn. It is a great pleasure and honor to be here to learn from each of you.
Thank you very much.
One more. Sorry. Kalendran, from Catholic Church in Jaffna, and also attached to Jaffna University.
So thank you very much for the self-introduction. It was good that we know each other. And we have 2 presentations now. One by Reverend Jnanamuthu Pilendran. I would like to request Jnanamuthu to come forward to the dais. And Mr. M. Kurian Thomas also come forward. Dr. Jnanamuthu Pilendran is a Catholic priest of the Diocese of Jaffna and a professor in Christian civilization and former head of the Department of Christian and Islamic Civilizations of the University of Jaffna. He was awarded the degree of Master of Philosophy and Doctor of Philosophy by the University of Jaffna for his research on Christian literature and Sri Lankan church history respectively. He is also a permanent lecturer of Sri Lankan church history at St. Francis Xavier Major Seminary, Colombo, Thurai, Jaffna. He served in parishes as pastor priest and held the post of director of Jaffna Diocesan Minor Seminary and vice principal of St. Patrick's College, Jaffna. He has published many research articles and is the author, editor and publisher of several books. From him, we will hear the establishment of Bonamorte Church and the spread of schism to Mannar and Jaffna, a study from a Roman Catholic perspective. That's an interesting work. Let us invite Dr. Jnanamuthu Pilendra. We do not know why these sweets are here. Is it some special meaning?
Some greetings from Bonn.
Well done. Good morning to you all. Reverend Chairperson, Reverend Bishop, Reverend Fathers, Sisters, lecturers, professors, and other participants. Good morning to you all. The establishment of the Bonamute Church, the spread of schism, Mana and Jaffna, a study from a Roman Catholic perspective. The main objective of this study is to identify and analyze the various factors that led in the first half of the 19th century to the establishment of the Bonamute Church at Alstoff, initiating the Pattuada schism in Sri Lanka and its expansion to the north. Schism, from a Catholic point of view, occurs when a baptized person refuses to be subject to the Pope or to live in communion with the members of the Church who are subjected to the Pope. The first half of the 19th century of the Oratorian missionaries of Goa working in Sri Lanka were confronted with new challenges with the advent of the British. Only a small band of 16 missionaries were available. Second, the unconcerned attitude of the ecclesiastical authorities of Goa and Cochin. The advent of various Protestant missionary groups. Demand for English education from the laity. Suppression of religious orders in Portugal and in the colonies under its rule. Reforms demanded from the Oratorians in their way of life. Thus, Rome, by a brief Ex Munere Pastoralis in 1834, abrogated the Pattuada Agreement and established Sri Lanka mission as a separate vicariate independent from Cochin and Goa. The Oratorians unanimously rejected the move and sent back the brief to Propaganda. Propaganda persisted in its decision and reenacted the same brief with Father Vincent D. Rosario, an Indian Oratorian, as its first Vicar Apostolic. Schism as the major hindrance. The group which defended the rights of the Crown of Portugal under the leadership of the Vicar Capitular of Goa, Antonio Carvalho, was known as the Pattuadists. They received support from some Oratorians and some burghers of Colombo. The Vicar Apostolic of the newly established vicariates, with the help of the European missionaries, defended the rights of the Holy See. This group was called Propagandists. Many and varied factors were involved in the process, making it a complex problem. Certain individuals like Bishop Jose Mario de Silva Torres, the Archbishop of Goa, Monsignor Bettakini, Monsignor Bravi, Dr. J.B. Miso, and some groups like the Oratorian, some burghers, the Crown of Portugal, and the Sacred Congregation for the Propagation of Faith. The Oratorians and the Goan schism. Initially, the Oratorians unanimously supported the Pattuada cause. Lately, they divided their loyalty, many to Propaganda and some to Pattuada. The appeal of Fathers Cayetano Antonio and Sebastian Pereira to the Vicar Capitular of Goa, Antonio Carvalho, for assistance to defend the Pattuada cause received a positive response. The Vicar Capitular supported the move by nominating Father Cayetano Antonio as the Vicar General and the Superior of the Sri Lankan Pattuada cause. Surprisingly, later, the three Oratorians, namely Father Cayetano Antonio, Sebastian Pereira, and Joaquim Alberto, sent a letter to Propaganda on 5th February 1838 clearly stating that a European with English knowledge should be elected to be the Vicar Apostolic. Besides, the three opposed the nomination of Father Vincent D. Rosario as the Vicar Apostolic. Multa preclare and Goan authorities. To subjugate the objection of the Patroado supporters, on 24th April 1838, Pope Gregory XVI issued the brief Multa preclare. The brief abolished the jurisdiction of the Bishop of Cochin, Cranganore and Mairapu over Sri Lankan territory and subjected it to the newly elected Vicars Apostolic. With the publication of the brief, Father Cayetano Antonio submitted himself to the Vicar Apostolic Monsignor Vincent D. Rosario. Governor of Goa warned and threatened the Oratorians. Governor of Goa exerted pressure and even issued threats to the Oratorians, telling them to reject the brief Multa preclare. Second, he issued special decree demanding all Oratorians working in Sri Lankan mission to return to Goa within 2 months to obtain general pardon. Third, failing to do so, they were told they would be exiled and their temporal properties in Goa would be confiscated. At this stage, only 2 Oratorians decided to return to Goa. Again, 1842, another letter was sent to the Oratorians promising an annual pension granted by the Queen of Portugal. In spite of all these threats of the Governor of Goa, the Oratorians as a group decided to remain in Sri Lankan mission and express their loyalty to Propaganda Fide. With the death of Vincent D. Rosario in April 1842, Propaganda seriously considered the possibility of nominating a European Vicar Apostolic. However, when the Oratorians explained their desperate situation, Propaganda, considering their loyalty and obedience, nominated Father Cayetano Antonio as second Vicar Apostolic. By this appointment, the loyalty of the Oratorians to Rome was again strengthened. The European missionaries, especially Monsignor Bettachini and Father Bravi, rightly marked out the secretary Father Cayetano D. Rosario as the real man behind all systematic moves and anti-propaganda activities. Thus, they demanded his removal from the office of secretary. As Father Cayetano D. Rosario enjoyed tremendous influence over the rest of the Oratorians, Monsignor Cayetano Antonio could not remove him from the secretary's post. European missionaries in the Vicariate. In the meantime, burghers of Colombo were fully convinced that only sending European missionaries and appointing a European Vicar Apostolic could remedy the deplorable state of the mission. On 1st December 1842, the Catholics of Colombo sent a memorial to Pope with 2,100 signatures requesting the services of European missionaries. Though Propaganda was also of the same mind, it failed to inform the people of its efforts to find European missionaries. However, with great difficulties, Propaganda started consolidating its position by sending more European missionaries. But the Oratorians saw the arrival of the European missionaries as a sign of disapproval and non-recognition of their services lasting over 150 years. The hostile and antagonistic attitude of the Oratorians turned into outrage when Bettachini was appointed as the coadjutor to Vicar Apostolic of Sri Lanka. On 2 occasions, the Cardinal Prefect wrote to the Vicar Apostolic to order all Oratorians to hand over the deeds of the churches and other properties for safekeeping in the archives of the Vicariate. Only some Oratorians obeyed the instruction and most of them refused to hand over them. But Monsignor Cayetano Antonio, fearing the danger of schism, did not insist to hand over the deeds. Monsignor Cayetano Antonio struggled hard to counteract the activities of the schismatics and to keep the Oratorians loyal to propaganda. He later requested Rome to take stern measures against the schismatics and openly denounced the stand of the Archbishop of Goa. After the pastoral letter of Monsignor Cayetano Antonio of 5th March 1848, cautioning the faithful of spiritual punishment for any participation in schismatic activities, the danger of schism diminished considerably in the mission. Schism and the laity. Most of the lay people were not actively involved with the origin and spread of schism. Under the leadership of Dr. John Boniface Misso, a small band consisting mostly of burghers spearheaded the schismatic activities. Many grievances led the people to support the Patwada cause. Firstly, propaganda not only refused to give due consideration to the legitimate demands of the people for spiritual reforms in the mission and for English education for their children, even misconstrued their genuine efforts as a revolt against its authority. Monsignor Cayetano Antonio struggled hard to counteract the activities of the schismatics and keep the Oratorians loyal to propaganda. He later requested Rome to take stern measures against the schismatics and openly denounced the stand of the Archbishop of Goa. After the pastoral letter of Cayetano Antonio of 5th, right. Secondly, Cayetano Antonio, who initially led the campaign and supported Dr. Misso, suddenly, to the shock of many, had switched his loyalty to propaganda, betraying the rest of the group. This behavior of Cayetano Antonio was seen by Dr. Misso and other lay people as a diabolical betrayal. Thus, when Cayetano Antonio was later nominated as the second Vicar Apostolic, the burghers became more and more dissatisfied and irritated. Disappointed and hurt by the betrayal of Cayetano Antonio, Dr. Misso and his supporters vowed to take revenge on the Oratorians as a whole. When the governor proposed the name of Dr. Misso to be the Catholic representative on the school commission, the Vicar Apostolic refused to accept him. In this backdrop, Dr. Misso functioned as the moving force behind all planning and implementation of the schismatic activities. Propaganda mission established in Sri Lanka. The nomination of Monsignor Cayetano Antonio as the second Vicar Apostolic on 14 May 1843 made Dr. Misso and the burghers furious and irritated over the moves of propaganda. Within a week of the installation of Monsignor Cayetano Antonio, Dr. J.B. Misso organized a general meeting, and there it was decided to request the Governor Episcopal of Cochin to send priests to save the Patwada supporters. The Vicar General of Cochin, Fra Manuel D. Joaquim Neves, willingly sent Father Carlos Francisco Rodriguez de Almeida on 6 February 1844 as the Patwada missionary with the title of Vicar General of Ceylon. Systematic activities at Calcutta Mission. The arrival of Reverend Rodriguez Almeida could be considered as the official establishment of the Bonamote Church, also known as the Goan schism in Sri Lanka. The Archbishop of Goa claimed that according to the bull of nomination, he had rights over the Sri Lankan mission because the bull of nomination was drafted according to the old formula, by virtue of which he claimed that he had the rights and jurisdiction over the whole of India and Ceylon. Schism in the Jaffna Vicariate. On 17 September 1847, Sri Lanka was divided into two vicariates, and by the brief Yam Inde, Petakini was appointed the pro-vicar apostolic of Jaffna Vicariate, and the administration of the same vicariate was entrusted to him. Subsequently, except Miguel Philip Mascarenhas, all Oratorians working in the north joined the Colombo Vicariate. Fathers Godino, Noruna, and Francis Zua and Mascarenhas actively carried out the systematic activities in various parts of the northern vicariate to support and encouragement of their confederates in the south. Systematic activities at Captivity Mission. Godino, who accepted the jurisdiction of Betacini, was entrusted with the Captivity Mission, including St. Anne's Shrine, Talavilla. At the end of the ecclesiastical year 1848, Godino fled to Colombo with the jewels and the money of the shrine instead of handing over his account to his lawful superior, Monsignor Betacini. Father Oruna, an European, was appointed to Captivity Mission. Father Noruna, another Oratorian, claiming to be the one who built the church, exhorted the Catholics of the mission through letters neither to hand over the keys of the church to the European missionaries nor to give any money or offering to them. Besides, he sent his servant to St. Anne's and collected the offerings of the church. Moreover, Noruna constituted a legal action against Father Oruna, accusing him of unlawful possession of the church. In February and March 1893, another Oratorian, Francisco Zua, visited some churches in the northern vicariate, removing all money he could, collected the tips from the people, and administered the sacrament without the jurisdiction of the Vicar Apostolic, and spread many accusations against the Europeans. Brief Impensam Omna of May 1848. The spread of schism in the northern vicariate has to be analyzed in the backdrop of the brief Impensam Omnem issued in May 1848 by Pope Pius IX. The Pope warned the schismatics of the Oratorians, the faithful and the supporters in clear terms, threatening canonical sanction. Due to certain defects in drafting the brief, it caused more confusion even among the Europeans. The brief was addressed to Monsignor Cayetano Antonio, the Vicar Apostolic of Sri Lanka, without any reference to the establishment of the Pro-Vicariate of Jaffna with Betacini as its Pro-Vicar. The Oratorians kept on to their former stand regarding the brief and rejected the division. They refused to accept the jurisdiction of Betacini, calling him a usurper. The Oratorians, revolting and causing schism in the north, were supported and protected by his compatriots in the south, who considered such schismatic activities as reasonable and justifiable. But the Cayetano di Rosario functioned as the prime mover in such rebellious and schismatic activities. The Vicar Apostolic was unable to take any strong action to punish the offenders because majority of the Oratorians were ready to join the schismatic supporters. Bravi courageously requested propaganda to take steps to remove the secretary, Monsignor Cayetano di Rosario, to bring the schismatic activities under control. For the people, such confrontations among their pastors caused confusions and much scandal. Schism in Metotamism. Reverend Miguel Philip Mascarenhas, the only Oratorian who opted to remain in the Jaffna Vicariate at its establishment, maintained a cordial relationship with Betacini till the end of 1849. But their relations became strained when Mascarenhas gradually spread false accusations against the European and created anti-European attitude among the people. In the meantime, at the beginning of 1850, Betacini transferred Mascarenhas from Mantua to Mission. But Mascarenhas, keeping the major portion of the congregation with him, instigated the people against the Europeans and refused to leave the mission. Even the suspension order of the Vicar Apostolic of Jaffna could not bring any change in his attitude. In this situation, Monsignor Bettakini with Father Siamin and Father Bravi visited Mentor during the Holy Week, hoping that his personal presence would make Father Mascarenhas submit to his obedience. Instead, the Vicar Apostolic and 2 missionaries were pelted with stones while Father Mascarenhas shut himself up in the presbytery. Bettakini left the mission in shame, took refuge at Bangala Mission, and pronounced the rebel priest and the Mentor community excommunicated. However, the situation at Prapangandal deteriorated into a formal schism and was brought to an end only in 1902. Schism at Badum Mission. Francisco Zua was sent to the north by Dr. Miso in 1851 to assist Mascarenhas in systematic activities. Francisco Zua, with a large number of followers, occupied Muddy Church by force. Father Ziamin, the missionary in charge of the mission, was prevented from entering Muddy Church. In this situation, Ziamin instituted a civil case against the illegal occupation by the Oratorian. Leaving Muddy Church after a few months, Francis Zua attempted to take over St. Anthony's Church, Pasayur, in 1851 with the connivance of the Mupu of the congregation. But as the people of the place were strongly opposing this move, the attempt ended in a failure. In July 1851, Francisco Zua was received in Heights by over 100 people and was settled down at St. Sebastian's Church. But the Mupus of other congregations refused to accept him. As such, a civil action was introduced in courts. However, it seems to have, as the schism did not last long, the court case did not proceed. But towards the end of 1852, Francis Zua succeeded in taking over the Church of Our Lady of Refuge, Orthodox in Jaffna. This church was under their clutches for 4 years. Eventually, Bettakini filed a civil case against the unlawful occupation by Zua. To sum up, several factors contributed to the origin of schism in Sri Lankan mission. Firstly, the lay people made sincere efforts to info propaganda about the many limitations and abuses prevalent in the mission. The people who made appeals for Europe, Vicar Apostolic missionaries to initiate renewal and reform in the mission. Rome not only turned down their reasonable requests of the people, but construed them as revolt against their superiors. As such, the request of the people to the Archbishop of Goa was immediately responded positively by sending Batuwada missionaries. The people too were extremely sympathetic towards the Batuwadists. Secondly, Dr. Miso, who had considerable influence over the people due to his wealth, profession and position, took an active role in supporting the Batuwadists. He was disappointed and hurt over the betrayal of Father Cayetano Antonio, and the latter finally submitted to the legitimate authorities. Thirdly, the schismatics were also encouraged and supported in their attempts by several disgruntled Oratorians. The writings of the schismatic Vicar General Pietari instance the frustrated Oratorians regarding the injustices perpetrated against them by propaganda. Fourthly, most of the Oratorians treated the people with extreme severity, and the people expressed their revolt in the form of schism. Fifthly, the bull of nomination of Father Mario de Torres, sent in 1843 to the Archbishop of Goa, was carelessly drafted by the formula, and the Archbishop of Goa had rightly the rights and jurisdiction over the whole of Indian mission. Thus, this caused much turmoil in the mission. Sixthly, though the apostolic brief in Pensa Mohammed was issued to warn dissenters and bring an end to the dispute, the contrary, it arose all kinds of turmoil and in the mission. Besides, in spite of all great prudence and moderation, the brief drafted carelessly failed to mention the division of the island made into previous year and the office of Provica of Jaffna. Even the European missionaries were confused over the content and the form of the brief. Seventhly, though Bettakini defended the rights of propaganda according to his opinion, of many, it was due to his policy of confrontation, collusion, and overreacting the system that brought mission to a bring of complete ruin. Eighthly, Roman decision regarding the demarcation line of Vicariate and the insistence that all the deeds of the church properties handed over to the respective Vicariate Apostolic intimidated the Oratorians and made them feel that they were gradually deprived from enjoying their rights and the fruits of the mission. Conclusion. In my full paper, I have given more details with references. So the conclusion you can read it for yourself.
So, thank you very much, Dr. Professor Father Jnanamuthu, for the wonderful presentation. It contains lots of materials and documents, and it gives a brief history of the propaganda and the Patwada conflicts and the result of that in the formation of the mission and the separation of some of the congregations. During the Middle Ages history, we can always see that the conflict of different missionary groups. They were all enthusiastic, vibrant missionary groups of the 15th and the 16th centuries, but there were occasional conflicts also between them. So that most of these things were brought out by Professor Jnanamuthu. Thank you very much. And now the floor is open for further discussions and clarifications. Yes.
Hello, Nilendra. Thank you for your presentation. I have one question and one announcement to the public. The question is, from an outsider's point of view, I mean Chinese, I'm wondering how oratorians, the Go and Praise, were so successful in Ceylon. And in our days, today, the extreme nationalism in today's politics, it is sensitive to think about the Indians, the Sri Lankans, the Chinese, when we pass, especially when we pass through the passport control. So I'm wondering, in the past, how was the identity of the, how were the Orientalian Goan identity were understood by the Ceylonese Christians?
As far as the Oratorians were concerned, immediately after the Portuguese left, the Catholics were left without any assistance. Almost for 30 years there were no priests. So it is first Father Joseph was, came as in disguise, and from that time, for over 150 years, they have been serving the church. If not for the Oratorians, I don't think Catholic Church would have survived here. So the early Oratorians contributed much, especially St. Josephus, Giacomo Gonsalves, and the others, because they, during the time of the Dutch here in Sri Lanka, the Catholic Church was persecuted. They couldn't have open service. They couldn't have any symbols. They couldn't have any church. The Catholic priests were ousted from the country. They were not allowed to stay here. That's what, after 29 years, Joseph came in disguise, and in secret way, he has been visiting the people and doing this evangelization work. So it's a tremendous contribution as far as the Oratorians were concerned for the Catholic Church in Sri Lanka. If not for them, the Catholic Church would have had a natural death.
Yeah.
Thank you. And a very short note to the public. We have been talking about Dr. Miso. Actually, the 7th generation of Dr. Miso will attend our workshop tomorrow morning in the Bunamorde Church. If you have questions, if you have a curiosity about this historical figure, please welcome.
Yeah, together with the statement made by Father Pillendorf, I would like to say that it should always be understood in the political background. In 1498, the Portuguese people came here And in the 16th century, this was completely under the Portuguese control. They always supported the Padroado. But in 1663, the Dutch captured all these ports. And the Dutch people came. They were Protestants. They were against the Catholics. They asked all the Catholic priests and missionaries to leave the country. That was the situation of the Dutch people. And then these people were struggling. That political scenario was also important. The political situation. And then in that political situation, some supported the propaganda, some supported the Padroade. That is also there, the political interference. And we should understood the history in that historical background. Any other questions? Yeah.
Dr. Misso, how he is supported by the laity? Can we get more about this?
Okay. Dr. Misso.
By the laity.
Hello. Dr. Misso, he is being a laity.
Laity, yeah.
How he got support from the people?
Because he was a very influential person. As a doctor, he was a very influential person in the society, and also a lot of wealth. And he was the Council of Goa, Council of Crown of Portugal. And he had a lot of influence over the people, especially the burgher community. So because of that only, he was able to influence the people. But initially, even Dr. Misso was in favor of European missionaries. Because at that time, already the Anglican Church was there. They were doing a lot towards education, whereas the Catholics were left far behind. So the parents were asking for English education from the missionaries. Whereas the Goan Oratorians, they couldn't give the English education the people wanted because they themselves don't know the language. So that's why the people, one of the greatest demand of the people was to send European missionaries so that they would come and start schools here. Even Monsignor Bettakini, as soon as he took over Jaffna, he started 2 schools there immediately. The Preston St. Patrick's College and the Holy Family Convent. Again, when he was in Kandy, he started a school. That was St. Anthony's College now. So the Europeans certainly satisfied the demands of the people by starting schools and giving English education.
Is it had any influence for the independent Catholic mission later?
Which one?
This movement of Dr. Misso.
Yes, he was the one who was able to lead the thing afterwards. For example, he sent the Padroado missionaries to the south, to the north, to help Mascarenes, Mascarenes. So he had a lot of influence in Colombia itself, as well as over the church, the independent church. And he was a wealthy man also.
Just following this question, can we say that Dr. John Bonifacio Misso's movement in the 1840s to 1860s made the foundation for the independent Catholic in Ceylon that eventually passed to the second phase of its own history when the Malankara Church came to Ceylon?
I'm not quite sure about the second stage of his contribution to the independent church.
Yeah, 2 more questions, one by Kurian Thomas and then...
Father, if I make a statement, that even the general platform of this conflict or schism, what you said, is a propaganda fide conflict. If I make a statement that even on that common platform, the issues in each and every community or church or region are alternating or changing. They have, see, what I understand is that everyone have their personal conflicts in each parish or in each community, or in each group of community. Can we say that if I have a conflict with you and I need a support, so I approach, if you are a propaganda faction fall over, and then I will go to the Padravado. Can we generalize this issue like that?
I don't know whether we can generalize it, but certain historical evidences or instances prove that. For example, when these priests visited the north, some elements who were not happy there, they support.
Yeah.
So such events were there. Whether we can make it a general thing, I doubt.
Yeah, the last question.
Professor Janarutu, my question is there any dogmatic influence in this? Because most of the Catholic defense, they keep off the dogma and bring in political issues to defend any dogmatic conflict that has come to the priest and to the laity. Dogmatic issues involved or not. I mean, it's generally, I find, a Catholic defense is this part is kept apart and say the infallibility and say no, there is no dogmatic issue, it's all political issues. Can it be said that was there any dogmatic issues involved here also?
Instead of saying dogmatic issue, right from the beginning itself I said it's from a Catholic perspective. So from a Catholic perspective, we accept the teaching of the Catholic Church. The teaching of the Catholic Church is we accept the teaching of the Holy Father. Holy Father as the Supreme Pontiff. So that is our belief.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Nyanamuthu, for the wonderful presentation and the interaction.
Thank you very much.
Our next presentation is by Dr. M. Kurian Thomas. That's on the conflict of rights, the incongruity between the Malangara Orthodox Church and the independent Catholic movement of the Metropolitan Antonio Francisco Xavier Alvarez Mariulios. Dr. Kurian Thomas is a well-known historian in Kerala. He has his diploma, PG diploma in marketing management. He is not an ordained priest, but he is very much interested in history, PhD from the School of Social Science, Mahatma Gandhi University, and postdoctoral fellowship from Kerala Council for Historical Researchers. He has authored 35 plus books about the history of the Kerala Christians, including the first history written in Malayalam language, the Niranam Granthavari. Now, I would like to call upon Dr. Kurian Thomas for the presentation.
Thank you, Father Dr. Mozu. Your Grace, dignitaries, and the curious persons on history like me here. Good morning. I'm directly coming to my paper. The existence of the broad spectrum of independent Catholic movements in the Portuguese Goa, British India, and Sri Lanka and elsewhere was neither an offspring of missionary work of Malangara Orthodox Church, nor an outcome of the zeal of the community to embrace the Orthodox doctrines of Christianity. In fact, it was just an alliance for convenience. The victimized Roman Catholic communities in the Padravado propaganda fide conflict needs an ancient Christian benefication to retain their episcopal succession. The search of Father Alvarez, the leader of the pro-Padravado faction, for such a partner ended up at the Orthodox Church of Antioch. He was directed to Malangara Orthodox Church in India by the Patriarch of Antioch for the convenience. As the spiritual head of the Malangara Church, he directed Joseph Mar Dinesh V, Malangara Metropolitan, to consecrate Father Alvarez as a Metropolitan. I think to say in the beginning itself that I prepared this paper purely on the documents available in Malayalam language, to which most of you are unaware or inaccessible because of the language barrier. So it is purely based on the Malayalam documents. As assigned by the Malangara Metropolitan, Mar Gregorios, later canonized as Saint Gregorios of Permela, ordained 4 students of Father Alvarez as full deacons on Sunday, the 13th of May 1889 at Old Seminary, Kottayam, India. On the next day, Mar Gregorius ordained them as priests. Even 4 of them, one was sent to Kalyanpur and the rest were assigned to Sri Lanka. There is only one eyewitness account of this incident, that was in the Adavadikal Chronicle in 2014. I published for the first time, I think the only time it was published. The document is fully remain as a manuscript. Since they were in Kerala for a few days, new priests were never trained in the best Syriac tradition that the Malankara Church is following. It is beyond doubt that they were practicing the Latin formula of ritual and the Holy Eucharistic service. Same was the case of Father Alvarez too. On 27th May 1889, Father Alvarez was elevated as a Ramban as the first stage of his episcopal consecration by Mar Gregorius. Ramban is just monk. Even if it is not statutory, it is the practice of the Malankara Church to every bishop must be elevated as a Ramban before his consecration. He was consecrated with the episcopal name Mar Julius. Others call him Julius. I think he himself was using the name Julius, but in Syriac and Malayalam terms it is Julius. On 29th July 1889, by Mar Gregorius with the assistance of Metropolitan Mar Athanasius of Kottayam and Agamali and Mar Ivanios of Kandanad, both services were held at Old Seminary. The consecration of Mar Alvarez Julius as the Metropolitan of India, Goa and Ceylon made a strong foothold for the independent Catholic movement, not alone in these territories, but around the globe. As a result, Father René Velate from the USA was also affiliated with the Syriac Orthodox Church through Mar Alvarez and decided to be consecrated as a bishop. His consecration held at Colombo exposed the first sign of incognity between the Malankara Church and its Latin branch. That was the terminology used in those days. Deacon Karijora Givergis, later he was the second Catholic of Malankara, Basilius Givergis the first, who was accompanying Metropolitan Kadavil Mar Athanasius as the secretary, reported those events at Colombo in 1892 as follows. On 14th was the Feast of Ascension. Padre René Velate was elevated as Ramban by Metropolitan Mar Gregorius, who celebrated the Holy Eucharist. On 15th, Mar Alvarez Metropolitan and others informed the bishops Mar Gregorius and Mar Athanasius that the consecration must be held in Latin rite. Arguments were exchanged since the Metropolitans from Malankara declined it. It created a lot of distrust. Alas, it was decided that Mar Alvarez should celebrate the Holy Eucharist on the day assigned for the consecration of René Velate, and the consecration should be held in Syriac rite. Finally, it was decided as because it would be a shame if consecration should not be carried out even after we reached here. On 17th, Metropolitan Mar Alvarez did the pre-communion service. After the prayers, the Metropolitans and the accomplices did the consecration service according to the Syriac formula and read the patriarchal bull. All three, Mar Gregorius, Mar Athanasius and Mar Alvarez, imposed their hands and consecrated René Velate as Mar Timotheus Metropolitan. The Amalogia, the profession of faith, was got read by the candidate, got it signed. After some rest, everybody went to the church again. Mar Alvarez said the Mass and performed some rituals. On 25th, Father Kochugoshi Katana celebrated Holy Eucharistic and also performed one part of the special service for the 50th day feast. 50th day feast is the feast of Pentecost. You may know that time the Malankara Church was following the Julian calendar and the other people following the European based churches following the Gregorian calendar. But in 1892, both the calendars having the same Easter day. So the Feast of Pentecost was also on the same day. It was not about compromise. Later, Metropolitan Alvarez and others performed the service according to their rite and sprinkled the water for 3 times and gave a sermon. Unquote. The service of Pentecost indicates some sort of compromise regarding the rite by mixing both the traditions. Even the itinerary of the consecration service too was a compromise. Yet it was very evident that the independent Catholic monarchs desired to retain their Latin rite. Conversely, it was illogical and incongruous for the Malankara Church to accommodate any rite other than the West Syriac for several reasons. Firstly, the Malankara was fighting legally and intellectually against Protestant reformists within the Church for the alternations of the latter prescribed in the liturgy. Any compromise may affect the battle adversely. Secondly, for the Church leadership who had traditional priestly training solely within the scaffold of the West Syriac ecclesiology was unable to envisage something else. And thirdly, Mar Ignatius Peter III, then Patriarch of Antioch, was so conservative did not allow anything other than the West Syriac ecclesiology and his Mesopotamian practices. He even forbade the indigenous rituals of the Malankara Church during his Indian tour in 1875-77. As mentioned earlier, the Alvarez mission considered as subjugated to the Patriarch of Antioch in the beginning. I said I'm depending only on Malayalam documents. But that notion was borrowed from the Lodge. The major reason for it was the incoherency in the means of communication. Alvarez complained in a letter to Mar Gregorius in 1895 that he did not got the statical, this authorization letter from the Patriarch, yet though he was consecrated in 1889. Whereas in another letter to Mar Gregorius, Mar René Velázquez described his difficulty in communicating with the Patriarch since the latter knows only the Arabic and Syriac. As a result, the relation of both Mar Alvarez and Mar René Velázquez was limited to the Malankara Church. Even though the Alvarez mission was described in the early days as it was subjugated to the Patriarch of Antioch, it is highly doubtful that any such relation was ever existed. However, the role of Mar Dionysius V was repeatedly mentioned in the then contemporary reports. And the independent Catholic churches under Mar Alvarez and Mar René Velázquez were described as the branches of Malankara Church. Later, the element of nationality made Mar Alvarez to adhere with the Malankara Church rather than the Patriarch of Antioch. In 1911, he made a public statement supporting Mar Georgius Dionysius VI. He was also canonized later. The Malankara Metropolitan, during the clash between the Patriarch and the Malankara Metropolitan regarding the governors of the Malankara Church. After Colombo, there was no other such incidents were reported. In fact, no such events ever happened to cross the rights each other. Mar Alvarez attended a few services like the consecration of the sanctuary, Rathol, of the Kunakurdi and Tripunithara Nadamal churches. He also participated in the consecration of Niranam Church. The level of participation of him in the services could be presumably less, and there not any evidences left for it. Deacon Kanyandra Alexander served sometimes as the secretary of Mar Alvarez, was ordained by Mar Alvarez at Brahmawar on 15th October 1911. No doubt it was done according to the Latin rite. Even though it was enthusiastically described as the Latin branch of the Malankara Church and as an offspring of the latest missionary work, the Malankara Church had little to do with these new churches. This was an unprecedented amalgamation, and the Malankara Church was not having any amiable system to accommodate people from a different culture and liturgical tradition. As a conservative community, it was impossible for the Malankara Church to think about anything other than the West Syriac liturgical tradition that they were following, and they were fighting for retaining the purity of at that time. Yet Mar Dionysius V permitted the Latin mission to follow their tradition. The following piece of news indicates its picture. Quote, since the parishioners of Cherakadavu, who established their church as a separate from Kanjirapalli parish, and the parishioners of the Latin Church of Nazareth near Kochi joined with the Orthodox Syrian Church. Upon their request, Deacon Manjani Yacob
of Cherakada and Deacon Patros of Nazareth were ordained. After their profession of faith as deacons on 14th of this month and as priests on the 15th, the Feast of Assumption, that is in August, by Mar Dionysius Metropolitan. Among them, the Nazareth parish will be affiliated to the Diocese of Mar Alvarez. Perhaps Mar Dionysius thought that it was possible for him to accommodate the Cherakadau parish, which follows the Romanized East Syrian liturgy, while realizing the difficulty with the Latin parish of Nazareth in doing the same. Beyond liturgical tradition, there were socio-cultural reasons for this incongruity. However, both communities were returned to the Roman Catholic Church within a short period, and both the priests were appointed elsewhere. The reasons for embarrassing the Orthodox Church by the people of Cherakada and Nazareth were unknown. But for Chennagiri is under the jurisdiction of Dioscorus, but I don't think that he knows that it was an offspring of the independent Catholic movement. It was an offspring of Chaldean right in tug of war within the Syro-Malabar Roman Catholic Church during the second half of the 19th century. Their leader abandoned them after the failure of the civil litigation in 1895, and they had no church or priest for a while. Most among them returned to the Roman Catholic Church. The remaining were forced to depend on the distant Orthodox Church at Velianan for the sacraments and burial. Hence, it was not so complex for them to come into terms with the West Syriac rite later. Even then, Father Manyadi Yaakov, the Romo-Syrian converted mentioned above, was appointed as their first vicar and served them till his sudden demise in 1903. It was clear that the Alvarez mission was permitted to continue with the Latin rite. At least up to 1988, Latin Mass was said at Brahmavar by priests from Malangara. Further, Catholicos Basilius Givaris II sanctioned the Latin rite to the new parishes of Tiruchirappalli by his Apostolic Bull number 104 dated 29/12/1936. The demand for more priests by the Alvarez mission was so complex to handle by the Malangara Church. An observation about the Chennagiri community by Father Kutil Yohanan Katta, one of their later vicars. It was difficult for the people who participated in the daily Mass to go to Velianan for attending the Holy Eucharistic. May apply for all parishes in the Alvarez mission. They needed full-time resident priests, but several communities joined with the Alvarez mission did not have a priest of their own. Sadly, no second-generation priests were emerged among them. As daily Mass was not a practice of the Orthodox Church, and the weekdays of the Great Lent were prohibited from celebrating Holy Eucharist, it was difficult for the Malangara priests to cater the needs of the Latin converts. It is also prohibited for them to celebrate more than one Eucharist service a day. In 1936, Metropolitan Joseph Marsaverius of Neranam visited Brahmavar, Honavar and Giripalli. He gave confirmation, anointing by Holy Chrism, to 270 children. This is according to the Latin rite, since anointing by Holy Chrism is done by all priests along with the baptism in the West Syriac rite. In Latin rite, confirmation has done by the bishop only after the children attaining certain age. Even the Latin rite was permitted and the Roman Catholic celebrations observed. It is doubtful that Malangara Church ever accepted those alien customs wholeheartedly. In the itinerary of the visit of Catholicos Basilius Givaris II to Colombo may take as an example. On 1937 October 24th morning, the ship reached Colombo. This is the court. Father Basil Jayavardhane, invited in advance, all went to St. Paul's Church. A huge gathering filled the church in advance. An English translation of our Taxa, the order of the Eucharist, was printed by that parish, was distributed to the gathering. Very Reverend Abba Alexios celebrated the Holy Eucharist and the Catholicos given a sermon. On 25th, Father Alvarez, the vicar of the Suriani Church, ushered him, His Holiness and his group to there in the afternoon. His Holiness reached the church and said litany. He spent a few hours there. After the evening prayer, they returned to St. Paul's. It is worth to note that St. Paul's is an Anglican church. There are no references to Father Alvarez or his flock there on the garden or in the garden party held on the same evening by our people. That was mentioned there. Also, the Catholicos or any of his group members celebrated Holy Eucharist at Suriani Church, even if there was an opportunity on Monday morning. Is it a sign of abhorrence towards the Latin Rite? Father Dr. Ramban N.J. Thomas, who was a Vicar General of Brahmawar Road, 1987-2005 period. God helped me to convert 750 families of these 5 parishes from Catholic Latin Rite to full Syriac Rite with the assistance of 4 priest colleagues. I don't think whether it was his mission. Clergy. The complex nature of the appointment of and remuneration system made it difficult for the Malankara priests to shift their station. Lethargy to travel and language barrier were also stood as constraints. Due to the conservative attitude, most of the Malankara priests were vacillated to say Latin Mass or to use unleavened bread. The demand for unmarried priests by the former Roman Catholics made it almost impossible for Malankara Church with mostly married priests. The report of 1896 gives a clear picture of that situation. Quote, Father Soares, the Vicar General of Metropolitan Mar Alvarez, recently came here, Kottayam, and from here to the Valley Tirumeni, Mar Dionysius V. Intention of the visit to search about the possibility to get any priest from here to the new parishes at Tirunelveli, Thoothukudi, Palayangode, Kanyakumari, etc., where there are no priests. Padre Father Peter Laima, who hails from Saudi Church of Kochi, who joined with us and ordained by us, and Father Jacob Katana, Vicar of Chanangiri Church, were sent temporarily by order of Tirumali, that is Mar Dionysius V. Unquote. It seems that the Malankara Church also compromised a little bit to accommodate the Latin branch. For example, the photographs of Father Navalis Karia, Father Manyadi Jacob, Father Putangulangara Yohanan, and Father P.G. Koshi are seen as not wearing the customary black cap of the Malankara Orthodox priests. The first 2, the Roman Catholic converts, did not have their beard also. The latter 2, without any Roman Catholic background, served outside Kerala with Alvarez mission, also said Latin Mass. Even though it was difficult to find suitable priests, the Malankara Church tried to its level best to find a few. Father Pudukulangara Yohanan served at Brahmawar and Sri Lanka. Father P.G. Koshi was appointed as the assistant of Father Norono around 1915 and served Brahmawar till his demise in 1938. In 1938, Father V.K. Daniel Tumbaman, Father C.M. Asahak Mavelikara, and Father K.T. Thomas Malapalli were also serving the parishes around Tiruchirappalli. However, the first among the Malankara priests volunteered to serve Brahmawar was Deacon Alexander Kaniyandra around 1905. He was the only Malankara priest ordained by Mar Alvarez, but he was forced to return due to the personal reasons around 1909 or later, I am not sure. But one of the personal reason was he got married in between. Finance. Funding was always a problem for Alvarez mission. A letter dated 7 April 1899 from Mar Gregorios to the Patriarch Abdul Mashiach II of Antiochia in Syriac language shows a clear picture of the situation. Quote, Abu Julius Alvarez is now at Colombo. He did not retreat from his preaching mission so far. He works from time to time at Colombo, Goa, Mannar and Panaji. Such a way, he works inside and outside India and sending his disciples. Most of his followers' work is among the Catholics. But he demands a lot of money. His works is not progressing as planned due to the shortage of funds. He and his partisans continuously request money from us. But from where we shall pay? We have much more demand for money than him. Yet we supporting them from our emptiness, little by little, for their survival. Unquote. This adverse financial situation always persisted. In 1938, Father P.G. Koshi requested for rupees 20,000 to build up some sustainable means for the new Tiruchirappalli mission. It seems that as that attempt had gone futile, another appeal came up about requesting payment of rupees 5 per month per person as salary for the 4 priests serving there, total 20 rupees per month in the very next year. Administration. The loose administrative structure of the independent Catholic movements in India, Goa and Ceylon also played its role in its collapse. There was no centralized administrative system for those churches spread around a very large geographical area. Perhaps Mar Alvarez was the only link in between. For the Malangara church, the little information provided by Mar Alvarez was the only link with its Latin branch. That too was quite infrequent. Letters of Mar Alvarez and Mar Rene Velate to Mar Gregorios were published in 1895, since a lot of people interested to know about the Latin Syrians. In other words, the Malangara church had no relations to the independent Catholic movements affiliated to it except what it had through Mar Alvarez. Perhaps the presence of saintly Father Norono retained the sole surviving community in Brahma. Also, as mentioned earlier, Father Jacob Manjadil, he was also a man of God. His presence survived this Channagiri parish, I presume. Conclusion. As the culmination of all the above constraints, the independent Catholic movements collapsed one by one. Only Brahmavar and Channagiri remained as the part of the Malangara Church. A report of 1933, that is the official report presented in the Malangara Syrian Christian Association Managing Committee no, I'm sorry, that's the next one. A report of 1930 showed the sympathetic stage of the church in Colombo as at the Colombo church, 1 or 2 Suryani priests from Malangara served for a while. After their return, Father Alvarez, an old and pious Latin Rite priest alone staying there. While the ship reaches Colombo port en route to Europe, the present owner stayed at the said church for 3 years. Less than 20 people were attended the service in the small but beautifully constructed church. The income as rent, etc., about ₹100 is enough for the expense of the priest. If an unmarried Suryani priest, well versed in English, willing to satisfy with the just means for livelihood, volunteered to come over here and assist Mar Alvarez and cater the spiritual needs of the scattered Malangara Suryani church members, it will be good opportunity for the Malangara Suryani church to do missionary work in the future. Reverend Dr. M.J. Thomas Ramban, the last Malangara priest at Tiruchirappalli mission, mentions the socio-cultural reasons for its collapse. Before that, unquote. I do not believe that all communities affiliated with Alvarez mission were the progeny of the Bhadravada propaganda fide conflict. There were several other reasons ranging from caste great walls to local and personal issues. Indeed, the Roman Catholic persecution and persuasion played a vital role in the collapse of most of the independent Catholic movements in India, Goa and Ceylon. That was fueled by the lack of personal care, funds, zend and conflict in the right. But beyond that, there were several socio-cultural issues that made the Alvarez mission short-lived. Concluding this paper, see, as I said in the beginning, this paper was made upon the depends upon the Malayalam documents, and that too was not in full. So for peripheral observation, of course, we have to go to the rest of the papers in Malayalam. Anyway, thank you for listening carefully for my paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Strean Thomas, for the presentation of the conflicts of rights. You know, in 1845, British people were there and Anglican missionaries were there in India and in Ceylon and in different parts in this region. And there are missionary reports. In 1845, in one of the missionary reports, the missionary says about the church in Kerala that their liturgy, the liturgy of the people in Kerala, is a mixture of Latin, East Syrian, West Syrian and Anglican liturgies. All these liturgies were mixed up in India during that period. There were Latin churches, there were Syrian churches, there were Syro-Malabar churches, and there were Syrian churches, Reformed churches. All these liturgies were there. And during that time only, Alvaris was joining the Malankara rite or the Malankara church. So these liturgies, there were conflicts of these liturgies, these different traditions, different rites were there. At present also in Kerala, there is a Latin rite, there is a Syro-Malabar rite, there is a Syro-Malankara rite, 3 rites in the Roman Catholic Church itself. And we have the Orthodox rite or the Jacobite rite. And then again the Marthoma rite, that is a Reformed rite in the Anglican way. So all these 5 rites are still there. So naturally there will be conflict between these rites. But by the grace of God, Bishop Alvaris and the community were well accommodated in the Malankara Syrian tradition. That is a wonderful thing, that they could follow their own rite, they can have their practices, they can continue whatever tradition they are trained in. That was the magnanimity of the church and the ecumenical understanding or the wider understanding of our forefathers. So now the floor is open for further clarifications or discussions about different rights or conflicts related to the mission.
Again, here my question is, was there any Anglican rite with Reverend Baba going to London and practicing Anglican rite and having even translated our liturgy into English, and it was done for a short time, and he was working as an ambassador for our church, and historic record also shows that he attended the funeral of King Edward in 1910. So are we forgetting that Anglican part, which was very short time and nothing has been followed up? But to me, there existed also an Anglican rite for a very short period through Father Baba, who was an Anglican priest from Pune, and then he went to London.
Father Dr. Baba was using the English translation of the West Syrian liturgy. And it was confirmed by two persons. One is Father K. Philippus, who met Father Baba while he was studying at London and Oxford. And he was Bishop Mattheophilos, and the former Bishop Mattheophilos. And second is Ramban Father C.M. Thomas. He is none other than Tomama Dionysius. I think he did the last rites of Dr. Baba. So he also said that he is both of them are saying that Dr. Baba is using an English version of our taxa. You just imagine, if you go through, listen carefully my paper, in 1937, Alexios used an English translation of our taxa. That's what they said. At St. Paul's here in Colombo. Where from he got that English translation? Probably from Dr. Baba. So even he, Father Abu Alexios and Catholicos Liveris II came back. That was even they were coming back from Edinburgh conference. And Catholicos Basilios Liveris II also met Dr. Baba in London. Probably they got that English translation from him.
Yeah. Yes.
Talking about the taxa, I remember in our archives in the seminary students, one of the first taxas we compiled or we got hold of English taxa was the one that Mar Ivanius of Bethany celebrated in Trivandrum when the Viceroy, in the presence of the Viceroy.
Yes. Yes, I mean, when Catholicos was there for receiving him. That, do you know the year? I'm not remembering it. I think it is after this 37. No, anyway, that is before 30. Before 30, I'm sorry.
Not after.
Maybe that one was given, maybe two.
Yeah.
Just an observation about the independent Catholic Church. There in Tamil Nadu, as far as I read, right from Tirunelveli, Thuthukudi, Trichy, wherever it is in Tamil Nadu, it was in this case. There, the Jesuit priests were sent by the propaganda. They were there, the parishes. Of course, it is a reality. Not everyone will be in agreement with the parish priest. There will be a faction. So in the parish, there are a few, they go against the parish priest. And this was made use of by the independent Catholic Church. This is the observation in Tamil Nadu. Wherever there is a faction, that is people who are rising against the parish priest, they are actually the independent Catholic Church, Alvarez and Zores, his follower, they come in assistance to these people. That's how that independent Catholic Church spreading in Tamil Nadu. Was that the case in Kerala also?
See, that I already mentioned in the beginning itself of my paper, that it may not be something doctrinal. See, in case of one parish at Tiruchirappalli, the problem was the caste. There were two castes in that church. And the one upper caste, I don't know what was this thing, upper caste accused that the lower, the Catholic priest is supporting more or taking care more about the lower caste. So it hurts their Jadi consciousness, caste consciousness. And in the case of this Chandagiri, that was really an independent Catholic movement for a different reason. That was a strike or a rebellion against the dictatorship of then Roman Catholic Bishop, European Bishop of Kerala, Dr. Charles Levy. Then it turns out to be a Chaldean Latin Rite conflict.
Yeah, there were always these Rite conflicts, and still it is continuing in many of our churches. That's okay. It's also enriching the church with the Rite conflicts also. Somebody is turning towards the east, somebody turning towards the west, and somebody looking nowhere. And that is also going on. Okay. Anyway, one more last question because we have to break for lunch. Yes.
No, as far as in Tamil Nadu, in my opinion, it is not the question of rights. It is simply a question of local difficulties, as he said, caste. Caste is there.
And it is also there. Yeah. One more question if you want.
How the Malankara Church supported Bishop Alvarez in his mission centers to economic
See, the basic problem for sending priests, that is what one of his major demands. Always the independent Catholic movement demands for unmarried priests. You know, even today, how many unmarried priests with our church? Wherefore? And secondly, our people did not like to go there because of social reasons. And finally, he demands for money. That's what we had seen in the letter to the Patriarch by St. Gregorius. How much money do we have to pay, give him? Okay, his demand is genuine. But if the treasury is empty, but even I had seen somewhere that some individual initiation was there to collect money for the Alvarez mission. Say like in Molanduruthi, by one of the managing committee member, Martyr later, Chalikora, initiated a fundraising program for Mar Alvarez mission. But I don't know the result of that. Only his appeal I had seen. So people tried the level best. And also, there was an interesting note in the then church's official magazine that there is an English a periodical started printing from Ceylon or Colombo, independent Catholic. The annual subscription is just ₹1. You all people who knows English must subscribe it and say and help them. So repeatedly that advertisement gains in Malangara Edavapatraya. That's all we can do.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any announcement, Dr. V? No, nothing. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Gyanamuthu and Dr. Kurian Thomas for the wonderful presentation and the interaction from the floor. We will